Rei Mikazuchi. That's the person we'll be talking about today, because in the latest chapter of Kengan Omega, chapter 204, we see Rei getting ready to square up against the clone Tenji, one of the direct subordinates of Yan. And hopefully soon we will get to see just how far Rei has come and whether or not the Raishin style is up to par to be used as a proper martial art to defeat your opponent rather than straight up killing them. But I will talk about Rei for a bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe, since I think it's important we have a little bit of context as to how he was in Kengan Ashura. And that is that Rei is more along the sides of a long to mid-range fighter. He used to get in pretty fast, get a hit in, hope you get knocked out, and that was really it. That was the extent of how far his martial arts actually went. In the Kengan Annihilation tournament, one of his biggest problems was of course Swapang, since Swapang was extremely durable and was fairly strong when it came to a close combat situations, which is when we see of course that Rei had a very, I would say it was a small bag, but he had a bag for close up encounters. However, this bag was completely ineffective against, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, the current king of the Kengan fighters, and that is Kuroki Gensai. When it was time for Rei to fight Kuroki Gensai, nothing, couldn't do anything. This just goes to confirm that his long to mid-range techniques are about as big as the bag actually gets. His close-up fighting style isn't exactly bad, but it's not so good that he could fight against someone who is actually stronger than him. I think the only reason it worked on Swapang is because, well, one, Rei is faster than Swapang at striking. The only reason Swapang was even lasting as long as he did in the Kengan Annihilation tournament was because Rei wasn't trying to kill him, and Swapang had pretty good endurance in terms of his skeletal structure. So we already have a very big problem when it comes to Rei, and that is that the Raishin style isn't exactly suited for martial arts. But in Kengan Omega, we get to hear that he has been doing some pretty good training. We see him in chapter 142 fighting against some well-fodder worm members. Or at least, these were supposed to be the elite members of the worms. That's what Zaiji said. That's what he said. Look, don't look at me. He took out elite worm members like it was nothing, okay? However, besides any of that information, we get to hear that both Rei and Hatsume were training with the Kurei clan or the Wu clan. They're about the same thing. I'm just not talking about the Westward faction. They were training with the Wu clan to develop, of course, their own martial arts, especially when it comes to the Raishin style. I think Rei definitely needed this type of training, but it's important to understand what could be the benefits of this training. And I think we've already seen the benefits of this training already, because Rei has showcased a huge substantial amount of growth in, I think it was chapter 200 or 201, where he is fighting or warming up with Ryo in a close quarters combat. We have to keep in mind, Ryo is very strong, okay? This man beat the shit out of Zaiji like it was nothing, alright? The same Zaiji who went on to do what? Some people, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear what Zaiji did to Akoya and Ryuki. They don't want to hear it. But Ryo, he held his ground, and now we're seeing Rei doing well against this type of person in a close quarters combat. Now, funny thing about this type of stance is that it's similar, of course, to when Oma fought against Lo Long, at least the way they're standing temporarily, which means that the close quarters combat type of style is more than likely the Kurei family techniques and not the killing techniques, and that makes sense, right? Rei doesn't want to actually kill people, so he would more or less take from the Kurei family tradition techniques. So that is more than likely what he currently has in his bag. So that Kurei copy technique, hey look, I'm not against it. Alright? Rei needs a bit more in the bag. He's missing a lot. Because again, his mid to long range is fairly strong. It's just his close range that has been severely lacking. However, there is another way, bigger buffs, of course, that Rei could actually get. And that is, of course, the most obvious. The same thing that Kuroki had when he fought him in the Kengan Annihilation tournament. And that is the Inception of Intent. This is basically, predicting what your opponent will do next and hitting them where they will be. This would be pretty good for the Raishin style, and considering again, Rei's striking is fairly powerful from mid to long range. If he can somehow manage to perceive a person's intent and capitalize on it from mid to long range, a lot of characters are in trouble because Rei is fairly fast, right? His game plan is literally hit you. Maybe if you're not out yet and he could hit you again and he's free to hit you again, he'll hit you again. But usually if it's too dangerous, he'll back away from mid to long range. That has been his plan. So with this type of technique, he would be able to find a lot more better openings against his opponent. However, there is a second option, and that is what we see from the giant killer who fights against Oma in chapter 167.2. So we see this fight, and of course Oma, we do know he's got, the inception of intent. He can predict what his opponent are gonna do, hit them where they're going to be, and he completely falls for predetermination. So, or let me say it the way, of course, the giant killer himself says it, the determinant prediction. Now, this isn't like perceiving your opponent's intent, right? This isn't the same thing. This instead is influencing your opponent's intent. So making them do something you want to do. Hence, you kind of do a similar thing that is about the same as predicting someone, but you just don't have to predict it because you kind of programming them into thinking this is a viable option. Now, my problem with this is that though I think it would be cool, I'm not sure how Rei could use that, right? I mean, I would love to see it, but it's just that it makes sense for the giant killer because he is a close range fighter. And though Rei has, he's definitely increased his close range game, it just doesn't seem like the type of technique he would whip out. I would say not necessarily in character, but I'm not against the idea in general. It's a good technique. And of course, we're gonna have the one that I'm personally, or the one I think will more than likely be what the buff Rei will get. I think it fits with his character a lot better, and it would be very nice to see a lot more people use this type of technique, and that is hiding your intent. We've actually seen this a minimum of 2 times in the story. One, Oma against Lo Long. When Oma did the Kure family traditions earth scraper and Lo Long didn't see that coming, it was a very odd type of situation. However, this is later explained by Oma himself when he fights Koga again, where he tests this very technique on Oma. And though Koga at this point in time, he kind of learned the general principle of predicting your opponent's moves, so he's familiar with the concept, though he's not necessarily a master at it. However, even though he knows how to predict his opponent and has the fist eye, he still could not see Oma's attack coming. And we know for a fact that this works on masters of prediction because even Lo Long was no match for this type of technique. Now, this actually isn't the same thing as, let's say, a miscalculation on someone who predicts something. So, for example, in the fight against Oma and Lo Long, there's a moment where Lo Long predicts exactly where Oma was supposed to be, but Oma had used the 100% of the advance. So, because Lo Long wasn't aware of that possibility, he just couldn't react in time, even though his prediction is correct. With this type of technique, hiding your intent, if it's done right, because this technique actually has 2 requirements. One, you have to hit your opponent from their blind spot. And of course, you can't, let your intent be known. At least those are the 2 types of prerequisites we know of. And Oma has successfully pulled it off against, some of the strongest characters in the series. And some characters that are just good at perceiving stuff. Like, of course, Koga. With this type of technique, Rei could go absolutely crazy because again, Rei thrives in a situation where he can land his hits, right? And if, of course, he can hide his intent from mid to long range, he could be in his comfort zone completely and be able to hit someone without them necessarily knowing about it. This could work for Lo Long, this could work against Kuroki, it could work against potentially anyone, right? If done correctly. Now, does Rei have this? I mean, I hope he does. But those are the 3 types of techniques, the advanced type of buffs to Rei that I am hoping for. Of course, we'll see what he actually pulls out against Tenji. Do I think it's gonna be the complete bag? It depends, right? Because Tenji isn't exactly a scrub. And though, again, Mukaku killed Ogi, Ray isn't trying to kill Ogi, he's trying to straight up defeat him. So that might be very different. In fact, it's a completely different type of challenge, actually. So yeah, short video about Ray. This isn't, by the way, this isn't the essay that I'm cooking up. I'll be doing that later. I think it'll come out around Wednesday, so yeah, you can wait for that. And yeah, until next time, guys, take it easy.